Hi, I'm Scott Santoro. I'm a graphic designer, teacher, and author of Guide to Graphic Design. We're in my studio in Lower Manhattan called Worksite. Worksite was created after exploring my family's blue-collar trade of plumbing. I realized in grad school that I could tap that as a metaphor to kind of inform my own graphic design work. In the sense, like my father dealt with systems in the walls, I deal with systems in the mind. He had a tough, tool aesthetic. I collect lots of tools and try to bring that tough aesthetic to some of the work that I do. They're inspirational because they have a utility about them and purity and authenticity about how they're supposed to work, and yet at the same time they're beautiful objects. And in graphic design, it's the same thing. It has to function, but also delight. It's an analogy I can make that feeds me, that connects me to the outside world. The tradition of design books is to begin with form, to teach form and then to teach ideas and thinking. And I really felt as if those books all had it backwards, that the way I teach, the way I practice my business is I begin with understanding what an idea is, then I bring supportive form to that idea. So this book is a little bit different. It's to teach what design is, what research is, what an idea is, and then to explain what form is and how to make that support that intellectual thought that you want to convey. If you don't have an idea and you stylize it and you make it look pretty or decorative, but it doesn't say anything, it falls flat. It doesn't resonate. Graphic design has to connect to the audience. It has to reach out and say something, but it's finding that intellectual idea that's the most important aspect of graphic design. What you want to say, what you want to convey to the reader. You've got to find that. So the book has a very eclectic spirit to it. There are voices from designers all over the world who bring their own approaches, their own processes, very revealing. You get a broad generalization of all the work, all the designers, and all the approaches out there. But the guide does have the premise that it is a guidebook, that you have to find your own way, your own premise, your own approach to your work. I think design, in essence, has to have an authentic honesty built into it. The designers that make graphic design have to want to really try to communicate information and make it in a way that brings form to the idea, that makes it pleasant to look at or powerful to look at. But the main goal is to convey something out that makes a difference in other people's lives. It's a way that I approach my work, it's the way I teach, and it's what Guide to Graphic Design is really all about.
Now I think of graphic design as a field of study not unlike liberal arts. That graphic design has a little bit of everything. It has a little bit of product, it has a little bit of 3D, it has a little bit of motion. And what's more, it's full of type. And type is our lingua franca. Type is how we convey messages. I feel like any course of study that fosters visual literacy is extremely valuable, particularly now when our attention levels are reduced considerably. To be able to be a content provider is extremely important for the next generation of designers. And to be an entrepreneur means that they have a business savvy, they have a conceptual savvy, they can take their conceptual ideas and make them into a product or products, and that will give them a leg up not only in terms of their career but in terms of their money-making potential. What's followed me all my life as a graphic designer is the need to propagate ideas and message, and that comes out of being political. For me, my most important book out of the 140 is one called Iron Fists, Branding the 20th Century Totalitarian State. And it's where I see design intersecting with power and fostering myths and other images that were intended to manipulate the public. I found the Nazi corporate manual, which is in here somewhere, but also, you know, like the first time their program was published in a brochure. This is part of the manual. It's the organizational handbook of the NSDAP. The idea was, okay, it's not going to look like this, it's not going to look like that, it's not going to have all these color formations, it's going to be very white, red and black, which is very similar to what the communists had, because he was in competition. A lot of this, what we do, is based on response to other things. You know, we're always leapfrogging the other arts. You look at something, you get inspired by it, and then you say, how do I make it better? How do I do better? So for me, I'm not going to go marching in the street anymore, but I can write and I can produce books that kind of inform our historical knowledge about how politics operates in my small area. Graphic design stumbled into my lap because I was doing cartooning, but I realized at a pretty young age I wasn't going to succeed at it. And I happened to get a job at an underground newspaper doing paste up, and saw that you could do other things with paste up. You could cut letters out and put them together, and it appealed to me just viscerally. And from then on I followed that course. But luck is everything. Fate is everything.
The mask room, I'll call it.
I'm George Cherney, a graphic designer. I opened my own office in 1955, and I've been at it ever since. Design, as I see it, is made up out of two major aspects. One is concept, and the other is execution. There has to be a balance. Much of the work that I've done is idea-oriented, concept-oriented. People ask me, how did you get this idea? What I call the eureka moment. You somehow never can recall that. All of a sudden it's there. And what gave you the idea, you really don't know. I'm very much influenced by the popular culture around me. It is absolutely important that you sort of have antennas that pick up the world around you. Otherwise, you run out of ideas. You have to be curious about the world around you, yes. And that's why, you know, you see me collecting things, and most designers do, interestingly enough. I think they all have little collections of sorts, you know. I come from a working class background. I still consider myself a blue-collar designer. The craft is really the basis of it all. I do a lot of work with a brush. I like what happens when brush hits paper. There's something that you don't totally control, you know. I did a calendar for the School of Visual Arts with a lot of brush work, and I sort of called it let it happen, make it happen. One part is, yes, you make it happen, but the other part is you let it happen, you know. If the paint runs a little bit further, then that so be it, you know. That's why I said I didn't touch it after I did it. That was it. You know, I didn't go back and try to fix one dot there or anything like that. Make it happen and let it happen.
I'm very fortunate that we have these big windows here in the office, but that's a metaphor for how we need to keep actively engaged in what's going on in the world. Right now, we're in a very automated society where you push a button and something looks like it's been designed already. I find it really fascinating to look at the social dynamic of what makes design actually happen. I came to design a little bit indirectly, which I think has been really valuable in shaping who I am. The idea of language and storytelling and the expression of culture was something that always fascinated me. I had a very independent design firm for 13 years in Los Angeles, and the computer was new, so there were a lot of different things going on with mixing media, old analog traditional media with the new digital, which was very basic at the time. And then after that, I went on to work at Ogilvy in Los Angeles as the creative director for the brand integration group there. So I went from an independent to an agency, and then after that, I came to Johnson & Johnson. And so part of what designers do is they create relationships, and there's a lot of connecting with different disciplines within the business and bringing in the richness of what designers do naturally as synthesizers of information. The student of design should always challenge the status quo and to think about what will make a presentation come to life. Because in the end, what you're looking to do is to really make an experience real.
Nowadays, almost everybody thinks they can do posters and do it their own way. Some people will just throw a photograph and put some letters on top of it, and that's their way of doing posters. It's always the metaphor and the twist of using the image not as a depiction of a pretty portrait, but just twisting it and revealing something meaningful that on the surface is not there. This is a unique way of thinking. It's not like a painter would think. But when you think as a designer, you think more as a logical person, like a scientist would think. And then you find to express that complexity in a simple visual way. So it's a very, very complex process, I think. I don't know if there is a lot of investigation how exactly the brain functions in that moment, but it's a beautiful process if you experience it. Then you learn something from each project. So I think it would be a waste of paper and ink and effort for me if I don't use the poster or the medium of what I do, if I don't say something meaningful that really hits people in the heart. This I published in 2008, and it's a collection of 12 posters that address different social issues that I thought were extremely important back in 2008. We still have the issue with the health coverage, the censorship. We experience censorship a lot. This is on the endless wars that we have. In order to protect peace, we create more and more wars. the material for these ideas comes from reality in a way. So the artist is like this prism or whatever you call it, where the outside world and the inside world inside you, they cross, and some magic happens and you come up with ideas. But I think you come up with good ideas only when you deeply care about what you have to do. If you are indifferent, the ideas are mediocre too. So you have to be involved with all your intellect, your emotions. That's when you generate good ideas.
My name's Paul Sayre. I'm a graphic designer, and this is my modest office on 14th Street and 6th Avenue in Manhattan. I don't think you grow up dreaming to be a graphic designer. I think you find it at some point, and things click, and you start doing something that you love. We are all exposed to this stuff, not knowing who's creating it, why it's created, and how it fits into the world. And you start connecting, and you go, oh, somebody's job is designing this album cover, like some of the early Kiss albums. Just staring at this thing for hours and hours and hours. You know, upstate New York, you know, trapped in my parents' house. I have been called a conceptual designer, but I think that the main point is communication, and it's touching somebody in some way. And I think that can happen a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's as something as simple as trying to make what you're making convincing somehow. This is a new novel, a fictionalized account of Watergate. And you know, it's a phone, it's a receiver. I mean, there's not you know, it's a bugged receiver, and it's die cut, and there's really no idea here. It's really the way this thing is executed formally that allows the thing to breathe. You know, I always feel like there's a soul, even though on the face of it, graphic design has no soul, I think. But it does, and I think where a graphic designer recombines things and takes things from, whether it be influences, a photograph, a typeface, it's the way things are recombined and orchestrated that is kind of the backbone of what we do. Graphic design, and it isn't fashion design. It's not. I don't think it's about trends or really any of that. I think in a way, it's like if you want to be designing books, actually now is probably a better time because the design of a book is going to be more valued than it was before. I know books are. This was one that we just finished recently, and you know, being able to do some of these special treatments to these things, it's like the books that are produced, they're hopefully there's going to be more care, and there's going to be more of an emphasis on it being a permanent object. So I actually am very kind of hopeful in that regard. We'll see what happens. I just need a little place that I love being in, and I get to design whatever is in front of me that day. I mean, I've always looked at it that way. I mean, sometimes it scares me a little bit because it's like, where are your big dreams? You know, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. If I'm worried at all about it, it's that. I mean, getting back to that digital thing. Because if I had an interest in doing that stuff, I'd already be doing it. In fact, I have done quite a bit in the past. It's just not. I don't know. There's something not satisfying about unplugging something and having it be gone.
So what I tend to do with these is mix colors, just because it looks more vibrant. Something you cannot match exactly on a computer. I mean, there's no. You could do something that looks similar, but you couldn't get the exact thing. I'm trying to make a whole shape out of her name. I'm making this up as I go. I mean, I have nothing in my head that I've started with. So it ended up with something like that.
Very nice.
Well, the idea is, to have a certain, quality of curve. But what I'm, trying to talk about is things like the shape of this T, or this. It should feel like it's got some life to it. Everybody calls everything type. Not all letters are type. I mean, type is repeatable, reusable, interchangeable letter forms. I mean, this is type here, but this is not type. I mean, that's all been done by hand. There's not a single letter that's identical to another letter. But, we just assume all this stuff is digital today, and therefore it's type, it's font. The word font is taken over. We need to, keep the terms more precise. At least talking about the past. Today, you have no idea what something is because all you see is an image and you don't know how it's manufactured. It's a style that relies on pressure to create the fat parts. If you work on a nice scratchy paper, you can get this antique look.
That's a great sound.
Well, the sound is actually a clue to how you're making things. So you should listen to it, and it will make a certain sound that you want or don't want. But you can see it very different. And talking to a couple of my close friends in the design world, what we can increasingly believe is that one of the best things a designer can do is to go to liberal arts school, and maybe not start by going to a design school. The one thing that you get by going to a liberal arts school is just a broader sense of what there is in terms of history, literature, culture. If you learn that stuff, then you're well suited both to understand your clients and to be able to bring new things to them besides just a cool typeface. People who grew up in the 80s, pre-digital, basically they survive because they've got ideas. They can come up with the concepts, and they can hire young people to do the illustrator, to do the photographer, to do the Photoshop. If you're looking for ideas, don't just go to annuals and all these books that keep being put out. Just get out there and visit places, not to read about the Trajan column or the Duomo in Florence or St. Mark's in Venice, but go there and see what's actually there. You'll see things that aren't in the books that you're not going to find online. Get off your chair, away from your computer, and spend a little bit of time, maybe it's, one day a week, half a morning, and just go look at stuff.
I'm proud to be a designer. I mean, I admire artists, but I'm not an artist. I'm responsive in that way, and I like to be given a set of limitations, and I like to be given a project, and then I like to figure out, it's the trapped on a desert island kind of thing. I like solving the puzzle. I think my work is very responsive, and I sort of try and figure out what that content is and figure out a graphic strategy that responds to it, that each aspect of that is related in some way to that content. It might be related to it conceptually, but it might be related to it formally. You don't know what you're going to get when you hire me. There is no one approach. It's always specific to what that content is. And every time, there's Massimo Vignelli, you know what that book is probably going to look like. You don't know what my book is going to look like. There's a sort of conceptual strategy that works in tandem with the grid and the type choices I make. So what those typefaces are often is a really essential part of my strategy for the project I'm doing. I like to usually look at what's been done so I can kind of go, well, I can see why that's not successful. Like what pitfalls are there? And I sort of analyze that too, and then figure out my own strategy. Because I always want mine to be not like anybody else's. What has somebody not done? I like limitations. I mean, I don't think they should be arbitrary, but I respect them. But, sort of figuring out where you can push them and say, well, did you think about making a book 10 inches by 14? That could be really interesting. Or what if we make it half the size and you can make it twice as thick? Books are also sculpture, so I like to be able to think of something as an object, and I think that their relative permanence intrigues me too. People don't toss them out. I mean, you can do a lot of ephemera and it's chucked. You can also do work that's digital, that's ephemeral. It's like websites are just gone. And I like having something tangible. For me, I find it very satisfying in the end that I have a pile of things at the end of the year that I made.
My name is Hillman Curtis. I'm a filmmaker, and I'm in my studio in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, New York. If I look at myself and I say, what's my theme over the last 9 years? And it's reinvention. I mean, it's always been reinvention. I was a rock musician starting up, and that led to graphic design through poster design, and that led to web design because I got good on computers, and that led to filmmaking because software and good cameras became affordable and usable, and I could do it myself. But when I started the artist series, I put out some rules and some limitations for myself because I don't think that an artist does well without limitations. And so one of them was that the films needed to be short. They needed to be 7 minutes and under because I felt like I wanted to play them only on the web because the web granted me immediate exposure. I didn't have to fill out a form to a festival and pay $25 and wait and see if they would please play my film. And if it was good enough, I really believed that would get out there and people would start responding to them. Advertising? No money attached. I wanted to have something over here that was mine. And over here, I could design the Yahoo homepage. My stepfather was a book collector and had a lot of monographs of photographers. And I just fell in love with portraiture. So I like to set up these moving portraits where it looks like a portrait, but it's actually 24 frames a second. I see the entire movement before I shoot it. And it happened on the IBM shoot. There's one where a woman walks backwards, and we had to time it all. And we had to have everyone cross at certain junctures. Before we shot it, I could see the movement. I could see how everyone came in and everyone came out and where they ended up, how they should jump, where she was. And then it's just a matter of executing it. I guess one big piece of advice I'd give a young designer is be prepared to reinvent yourself. Be prepared to go out on a limb occasionally, and be prepared to do the things that you feel strongly about, that maybe other people don't, that maybe don't have an immediate source of income or revenue. For me, what started out as a vacation, a creative vacation from these bigger corporate jobs, has become my life calling.
I am Jessica Wexler. I'm a graphic designer and a partner at Greenblatt Wexler.
I'm Michael Greenblatt. I'm a graphic designer and a partner at Greenblatt Wexler, and we're in our studio in Koreatown.
A lot of graphic designers describe themselves as problem solvers, and we're not problem solvers. And we're not interested in communicating universally to everyone all at once. In fact, I don't think either of us really believes that's possible or appropriate. Or interesting.
I would say like emotion and personal expression are both like they're big themes in our work.
We're really invested in how style communicates.
Style as form, but style as like content or process or way of making something. Like we always talk about how style is like such a loaded word, especially in graphic design. And like, I guess when we talk about style, it's definitely like all of those things: process, content, and form.
One of the reasons why I think that Michael and I enjoy our collaboration is because he's like the one person that I can be very honest about what I think with immediately. Like there's not a real worry about hurting someone's feelings or saying it wrong. It's so important to be able to be honest about what you actually think, because otherwise your vision goes nowhere.
Well, it becomes impossible.
It's diluted.
I mean, we've had several projects where like once things start to get diluted, like we look at each other and we're like, I don't know how to make this anymore. Like I don't know what we're making. Like I don't have the effective criteria anymore to judge whether what I'm making is good or bad. So like and those are usually really scary moments, and then we're like, okay, we need to pull back. Like we need to reconsider like how we're approaching this. Most of our successful projects have been with clients who like to talk with us, who want us to be collaborators with their project and like talk to them about the content and like what else the content might include or how it could be shaped, and those have been sort of our favorite kinds of projects.
Both of us come from small business. Like both of our parents had small businesses. And we grew up around that and doing that, and was extremely customer service based. You know, like what is a small business if it's not like working to please its customers?
Right.
So what is a graphic design studio if it's not working to please its clients? Is kind of something that we continually try and ask ourselves, and we're just trying to develop the answer. Like this is what it looks like now.
I'm Agnieszka Gasparska. I run a firm called Kiss Me I'm Polish, LLC. I'm a graphic designer, and I'm in New York City. Design is all around us, but everything I think that is designed is an answer to a question or a problem or some sort of a puzzle that's being solved. And it's not about really seeing the finished product in your mind. It's about kind of having a loose, out of focus feel for it, but then kind of giving yourself the time to kind of get there by, step by step. And I remember somebody once said to me, I don't do well with a blank page. I can't really, if you give me a blank page, I I'm kind of stuck. But if you give me a set of parameters and rules and a problem to solve, that's when, like, you know, I'm happy. I go to town, I try and figure it out. That's from a project we're currently working on, which is working on a new initiative to kind of create an urban plan for New York City's growing urban farming movement. At the core of it, what we wanted to try and communicate through the branding was that combination of the grid and the organic. And I feel like it applies to that project, but in a way it applies to so much of what I do, what the studio does. It's like sort of the motto, the grid, you know, the structure, the kind of the math, the system, the grid with, you know, personality and hand-done things and fun and playfulness and kind of a little bit of a different approach. So that, in a way, is sort of, I guess, yeah, it's a lot more than just for that project, I think. There's got to be a balance. Like, for me, it's about the structure, but then it's about the unexpected as well. Like, there has to be something off-kilter about it. Something that's really, really important is just the level of fun. I think it's important to work hard and learn through what you're doing, but you have to enjoy it and you have to enjoy the process, and fun and being kind of playful is crucial to any creative process. I can get very obsessed with details. I was struggling to redesign our website, which had been left kind of undesigned for 6 years. One of the things that was really important to me was to do these little details throughout the site that carried with them a lot of personality. I wound up being obsessed with this kind of very Polish or Eastern European style of handwriting, which is a penmanship that is very regional to that area, and I wanted to include bits of that in the site. And it, you know, stupid detail took so much time to do, but I was invited to a conference to give a keynote speech because the guy who was directing it looked at the site and was like, "Oh, this is so beautiful." And it was like, there's something about that sort of triggered something in his brain. And, you know, people, I don't know, I think there's gems out there, and I think very often they're in those little details, and it carries through.
I guess I like working as a designer because it's about helping people kind of talk to each other. You know, if people have something to say and they don't know how to say it, or they don't know who they're saying it to, then it's our job to kind of help that process along a little bit. The moment of coming up with a good idea, when it's like, oh, that's the thing, it couldn't be any other thing than that, like how perfect is that? That's like the drug, I guess, we're all sort of, you know, addicted to on some level. If there's just some skill you don't have, especially as a young designer or a student, that you could acquire. And the example I'll use is years ago, there's this woman who applied for actually an internship here. And I remember the first day when I interviewed her, I said, "So we do everything here in Quark Express." You know, this is years ago. And you know Quark Express, right? She's like, "Oh yeah, no problem. You know, I do work in that all the time." In reality, she had never used it. And at the interview, I just said, "Yeah, okay, great. You know, okay, your work is nice. You know, see you in a couple weeks." And she just went back and learned Quark Express. So, okay, it worked out fine. I had no idea that this had happened until years later. She told me, and I just love that. I mean, so there is something to be said for bluffing when you can actually come through in the end. I think that the studio is kind of driven by the fact that I just like to do different things. So like right now we're doing more sort of almost, I wouldn't quite call it advertising, but we're doing some sort of campaigns for clients. Before that we went through a period of doing more magazine work. We've had a signage period, we've had broadcast graphics, you know, television period. And I think that these things tend to come in waves for us. I mean, I basically am kind of open to doing whatever shows up and interested in trying to figure it out. And we've been lucky enough to find clients that are for some reason okay to say, "Oh, you've never done this before, would you like to try?" Like when I was in school, I remember they brought this guy in once a week when we were seniors to do the like business of graphic design class, and all of us hated this guy. Like we just thought like, oh, what a loser. Like, you know, this guy's all worried about money and he's got to wear a suit and all this stuff, you know, because we were at that age and that's what you're supposed to do. And I think I should have listened to that guy. Things would have been a little bit easier. If you have the sort of boring stuff figured out, then you have the space to do the fun stuff.